Welcome to Close the Gap, where we thoughtfully engage with CEOs and top industry leaders all working to close the female equity gap in the C-suite and boardroom. Christine Gannon, the CEO of Brightworks Consulting, and Dr. Antoinette Farmer-Thompson, a senior leader with Arizona State University, host insightful conversations responsible for moving the needle for female participation in the C-suite.
So Melissa, welcome. We are so honored to have you today on Close the Gap. And for our listeners, we have Melissa Washington, the CEO of Women Veterans Alliance. And we are so thrilled to have you here today. Welcome.
I'm glad to be here.
So a little bit of background about Melissa. She is a Navy veteran. She's also a disabled veteran small business owner, speaker, author, and an award winner who's connecting women veterans across the nation, which is so important. Sometimes our women veterans get left out of the conversation. So thank you for all that you're doing. Melissa proudly served in the Navy and decided to leave the military early to pursue a career while her husband continued and spent 21 years on active duty in the United States Marine Corps. She earned a bachelor's degree in business management, and then she transitioned into a successful career in recruiting and human resources for more than 10 years. She was then laid off from her job in 2009 due to the economy, marking the beginning of a nearly 2-year journey in career reinvention that allowed her to use her experience to help others. It all started with holding LinkedIn workshops for job seekers at her dining room table and then speaking at venues across the nation. In 2011, she started her own consulting service called Melissa Washington, Inc., offering consulting to businesses and individuals using LinkedIn for researching, job seeking, recruiting, and collaborating. Her journey took a little bit of a detour as she worked for LinkedIn for 4 years, planning global corporate meeting and events. And shortly thereafter, she authored Get Back to Work, Smart and Savvy Real-World Strategies to Make your next career move. So I'm going to continue with her bio, but I just want to point out for our listeners, Melissa, you transitioned out of the military, which is an Oscar-winning feat in itself. Many people have such a difficult time doing that, and you made a series of pivots, which I think is really important for our listeners in terms of going down one path and then taking another path based on the economy or your desire to do something different. And you've done it very successfully, and in the midst wrote a book as well. So I want to come back to that. But in 2015, she got women veterans together to meet at a local restaurant, and that's how the Women Veterans Alliance started. Not long after, she partnered with James R. Morrison Photography for a really important project called What Does a Woman Veteran Look Like? And in 2018, she founded Women Veterans Giving, and in 2019 became advisor to the American Veteran Organization of Women magazine. In May of 2020, she was featured in Vantage Point, which for those of you that don't know, it's a very prestigious and award-winning blog of the United States Department of Veterans Affairs, in an article called Melissa Washington, Breaking Barriers, which is so fitting when I look at your history. She's been featured in the Sacramento Business Journal, as well as other magazines and newspapers, and she's a speaker as well. So Melissa, welcome. We were thrilled to have you. She has a husband of 25 years, Jared, who's also retired military, a Marine who served in combat in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and Operation Iraqi Freedom. And you have you're a proud parent to Maya and the daughter of a Bronze Star Army Vietnam War veteran. My goodness.
Yes.
Wow. So as you think back, I want to go back to the time you transitioned out of the Navy. Talk a little bit about that and how that was for you as a woman, because I think it's very different for women when they transition. And you made a pivot into HR and recruiting. How did that transition work for you, and how did you find support during that process?
So I love to share my transition story because it's not a typical transition story. So the highlight reel is I walked off my ship 30 days later, I married a Marine, and 30 days later, he deployed. So that was actually going on 26 years ago. So that was my transition of being an active duty Navy to becoming a Marine Corps wife. And then also having to find a job and adjust to that. And my first job out of the military, and actually this was back when you had to fax in your resume to jobs. So, going through the TAPS process, you're looking at the newspaper for jobs and, faxing them in. So my first job that I got out of the military was working at a floor cleaning company. And the only reason that I got the job is because I knew how to operate a floor buffer. Because in the Navy, we stripped and waxed the deck. So I knew how to use a floor machine. And so when we talk about our transferable skills, my transferable skill for my first job was I could operate a floor buffer. So probably a little different transition than most, but that was my transition experience there. So kind of just thrown into everything and had to, adjust to being married and my husband deploying and trying to figure things out and still being young and all that. And then just some of the adjustment too was, when you meet other wives who haven't been in active duty, it's different. Some of it may be, there was some friction between some of them and some of them not. So it's just trying to find, I don't say my place, but just trying to fit in with these group of, at that time, mostly women, as a wife, because I wanted to contribute too as much as I could, because I having my experience been on active duty. So that's my story.
Well, wonderful. I think it will take a different conversation to hear how the Navy connected with the Marines. I think that's good.
Yes, that's a whole other story.
That's a whole different one we're looking forward to. So tell us a little bit about then your climb in corporate America, and then how that really kind of parlayed into creating this incredible entity and association for women veterans, because I'm sure that experience in corporate America drove you to do that. So can you talk to us a little bit about your climb and then what happened after that?
Absolutely. So having my experience and looking back on my experience, these have all been stepping stones for me to be successful to what I do today. Because had I not had these experiences, which I'll share, I wouldn't be able to do what I do today. And so it's taking all of that experience of, had owning my own business in the 90s and then getting into, corporate America, working at, larger companies, and, you want to climb the ladder, right? The whole thing. That was my mission. That was that's where I was headed. And, and working at companies such as, working at Nissan's headquarters and doing human resources and recruiting there, and working at, I don't know, they were the second largest staffing company, Randstad. They might still be first or second, but having that experience and working at Oracle, which was the last place that I'd worked before I got laid off. But gaining all of that experience working with others, and then to be able to, fit in with them, because again, also still, my husband's still active duty. So also too, there was potential that he could transfer, then we'd have to move. So having to make sure having that flexibility of being in there. But what's interesting too, is as I look back on my, last 20 something years, it's still being connected to a lot of those people. And it's all about who you know, and having those connections with those people that could help me with what I do today, which has happened, having those connections, working there. So it's always good, to not burn any bridges if possible, because you never know who you might need to, to reach out to be able to help you in what you do today. But that was my life. I mean, that's what I wanted to do, is just continue to do this, become vice president, the whole thing. But that all just changed And we talk about transition, transition and pivoting very much the same thing. And we talk about military transition. And, as people transition out of the military, there's going to be other times we all have to transition. And I've been through several transitions, several pivots. And, and what does that look like for me? And fortunately, again, all of those, had I not had those experiences, I wouldn't be to be able to do what I do today. So, we're taking our experiences, and again, my experience and my things that have happened to me are going to be different than other people. And so how I got to where I got to is I was living in Southern California. My husband was getting ready to retire, and the company I was working at, had landed the Oracle account, and gave me opportunity to get a promotion, move up to Northern California. Mind you, it's 2008. The economy is already starting to tank, but trying to be optimist. Hey, it's gonna. The company's giving me this wonderful opportunity to move, so we did move, bought a house, and 2009 I got laid off, along with thousands and thousands of other people. But what was very similar to someone that transitioned is I only knew about 5 people in Sacramento. That's where we moved to.
Wow.
I had no connections because, when you're first started a job, you're there like 10 hours, you're working. I had my daughter, you're just head down, just focused.
Absolutely.
Like I got my new house. I had barely had time to network or, that type of thing. So it's like, okay, here I am. But with myself, I'm like, I'm a recruiter. I should be able to find a job, right? Yeah, that did not work. And also too, I went through some severe depression, which also was grief. And I didn't realize it at the time, is because when we think of grief, we think of somebody has to die to grieve. But I was grieving a job loss. I was grieving a loss of my identity of who I am. So it's like, here you go. You have nothing. Not a sense nothing, but there's no, I don't feel like I had a purpose. I didn't have, it's like, because right when we identify ourselves, we give them your business card and your title is who you are, which I found, going through this whole process, that's not really who we are. But that's, just having that sense of not having, again, the purpose. And I grieved, and it was interesting because my husband didn't know this because he was still in the process of transitioning up here. I would take my daughter to school and I would come back home and I'd sleep all day. It was one of those things where it's like, hey, and that's not me. And that's not, but I had to go through that, right? You kind of just have to hit that lull. And then just looking at the job market. So now it's, 2010, in Sacramento was hit pretty hard considering a lot of the government. So then trying to find opportunity, it's like, okay, where is the opportunity here? So I created my own. What started is I saw, again, in the newspaper, there was an article about at the EDD, when we think of EDD, we think of entry level positions, right? It's like, okay, the EDD is not going to have opportunity for somebody professional.
What is EDD, Melissa? For those?
Yes, it's the Employment Development Department.
Okay.
Yes. And so they said, well, we're having workshops for those that were, in the professional space, managers, come to these different meetings. So I'm like, okay, I'll come to the meeting, and, and here I'm networking with people that, again, remember 2010, all these fantastic people of great experience, but there's just no opportunity out there. So with that, one of the classes, so this is now 10 years ago, one of the classes was how to use Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, how to use social media to find job. I'm like, okay, I pretty much, I know how to do this. I was at that time, one of the younger ones in the class there. And, the presentation was it was a facilitated, it was the PowerPoint, okay, this is what you do. So I'm like, you know what? I know LinkedIn. I was an early adopter of LinkedIn. So I started holding LinkedIn workshops at my dining room table. It's like, okay, I got to do something, right? And so that's the thing too, when I could have said, oh, woe is me. I'm sending my resume here and nobody's replying. It's like, if we can take what we're good at and be able to give that back to someone else. And that's what I was doing. But also too, I was honing in my craft. I was refining it, right? What better way to make a mistake of people, it's like, they don't know. I didn't know. I was just kind of going with the flow. but I would do a 2-hour workshop. I mean, every week, and we'd just go through it. And it was breakfast time. People bring in breakfast stuff and lunch stuff, and it would help. There's some great success stories that came out of that. But that was my pivot of doing this, to where just things, I don't want to say they fell into place, because it's so frustrating, especially when you're, potentially could lose your house. I mean, we couldn't refinance because we had too much debt. Well, that's the reason why we needed to refinance, is because we needed to, decrease that. So then I'm at risk of, okay, we might lose our house. My husband gets out of the Marine Corps, gets a job up here, takes a 30% pay cut. So it's just like, okay, just keep going. I mean, just like the hits keep coming, right? And then also I'm very much an extroverted person, but I've also have clinical depression. So there are also times too, and I take my meds, but there are just times when that hits. So you just don't know, okay, if we're going through all this, how am I going to be able to get through this? And for me, the best way to get through is to give back to others, to be able to share things that I have, to network. I love to be able to, and this has been so hard, this whole isolation thing of not being able to physically be with people. I mean, it's great to Zoom, but just to be able to have that connection and give people a hug and, talk and see how everything's going. So that was and again, being on unemployment, the amount of money, it's nice, but it wasn't really helping. The only way I was able to get through it was to continue to do these LinkedIn workshops. And I started a job seekers group here locally. And that's where I kind of got my experience of starting groups. And that's where all that led up to.
So as you've been talking, I've been capturing some key themes that have come out of your journey, which I think would really help other women that are listening in terms of, this is real life. This is what happens not only to veterans, but civilians, right? I think the women veterans that are listening can completely identify with a lot of what you're talking about in terms of going into an environment where there are other wives and you're really trying to fit in and create your own tribe and not knowing how to do that. And that's very similar to a civilian woman going into a new environment in a job where she really, how women can pivot. And you talked about some real things that have happened to you, which I know have happened to many women and men throughout their career because it's life. So you talked about dealing with depression. You talked about grief and dealing with, understanding what it even was and how to move through that. You talked about being very flexible. So being in environments that were brand new to you that you hadn't been in before and having to really kind of find your way through it. You talked about transitioning not only out of the military, but, because of the economy, a lot of people had to transition into different careers to feed their families and to maybe pick a different career because that career wasn't coming back in the way it had been there before, which could be very similar to the COVID situation we find ourselves in right now. I'm thinking specifically of the hospitality industry and the workers that have been displaced and how they're looking to pivot and how the healthcare industry is stepping up to really say, listen, we can utilize those transferable skills as you talked about, Melissa. We can utilize those skills that you use in hospitality and healthcare or IT for customer service. And so making those transitions, but really honoring the process. And I feel like that's what you've done in terms of honoring. Sometimes it just isn't fun. We might lose our home. I feel depressed. I'm not sure where I'm headed, but I'm going to contribute back to others so I can find my way. You talked about networking. You talked a lot about, not having that network, but just making one, setting yourself up so that people could come to you. Almost if you build it, they will come, and they did. And then having a purpose, really understanding your purpose at that moment, which we know changes over the course of our career and our life, where we might have a purpose for X number of years and we got to shift and we have a different purpose. So I really love what you've shared in terms of these different themes for people to really understand. There's no one way path. The path is a little, different for everyone, but some of these things happen to all of us. So I want to ask you a little bit about what would you recommend to women for them to overcome obstacles and barriers. And it could be women veterans, but as they look at their corporate environment or as an entrepreneur, what are some key things that you would give them as advice to overcoming barriers?
First thing is don't sell yourself short. Women were famous for doing that, which we need to stop. And they've even have studies that have proven, coming from the recruiting backgrounds, very interesting to read some of these. If you look at a job description, right, and they did studies where they had the men look at the job description, the women look at the job description. The women, they have 80% of it or 70%, like, I'm not qualified. The guy comes in, has 40%, he's like, yes, I'm going to do it. So we have to be able to have that confidence and that, like, yes, we can do it. One of my favorite saying is we miss 100% of the shots we never take. So, and we always want to wait till we're ready, right? It's like, I'm not going to go on vacation until I lose 10 pounds. Well, it's 5 years and you haven't taken a vacation. So it's just like, we want to be so set and ready to get out there. We're not afraid to take risks. And I think a lot of what I've done, I've just kind of just jumped in, not testing the water. And of course, you get burnt a couple times, but it's just the way that we learn. And for some people it's okay. It's those people just, okay, this is all that I want. And I'm fine with that. And that's great because we need those people. And I always look at stuff as a stream, right? You need those people that are the rocks. They're just gonna be there and they're not moving. But then you have the people that are that water and they're flowing and they're moving. And how do we continue to move? And also too, having whether a mentor or just a network of other people that you feel comfortable with that are where you can share how you feel, and you're not going to be put down, but also too where you're going to be encouraged. It's not one of those things. And even when I was running the job seekers group, everybody had to have an accountability partner. And that was the one that was going to say, get your butt up. It wasn't like, it's like you need that person, right? And you have to say, okay, it's being a demanding business partner and having that and saying, yes, we need that. So it's having, you can have, and that, person may be your spouse, which I usually don't recommend, but just having another person to be able to help to push you through to do that. But also too, when you're an entrepreneur, you've got to, if you're dependent upon making that money to be able to pay your bills, whether it's your business bills, your personal bills, keeping the lights on, still being able to have Wi-Fi, you gotta take those risks and do it. And, and again, the women thing, and too, so much even with women veterans, they don't know their self-worth and they don't understand their self-worth. Because women in general, we sell ourselves short. And I think too, that's another thing where we need to, when we're in corporate America, is we're afraid to ask for the raise. We're afraid to, when we're in that. And again, I've interviewed thousands of people. I've been on the other side of the offer letter, right? And it's usually the men that'll push back, not the women. So we need to be able to help empower our women to be able to negotiate that compensation package, to be able to negotiate those deals when they're in the room and not just accept what is offered. And I feel, we've been in that, starting to really shift into that movement, but we also too need women who know how to do it, that want to be able to share with other women how you can do it. And just be able to talk to other women, especially before you're going to go into the job interview or to a business deal, be able to, pick up the phone on your way there and have someone ready to pump you up, right? And be warmed up, right? Anybody that goes out and plays any sports or anything, there's a warm up. You just don't get out there and throw the ball. So if you can have that man or that woman that's going to be there to have you ready and to have you to be focused, that's so key. And these are things based upon my personal experience, things that have happened to me, as well as my, speaking with other women, and we've got to stick together. And again, let's pump each other up and let's make this stuff happen.
That's funny you should say that, because in our book, in our research, we talk about the movie Moneyball, and we talk about the importance of coaching and putting people around you. And I noticed that part of what you're doing, to your point, is you're helping women see it. You're helping women catch the vision. And you can't achieve it or believe it if you can't really see it. And so I think it's really critical. So tell us about what you're now doing to help women get on boards. Because again, the women that are in essence coming behind and seeing others and being coached by the ones that are actually achieving and getting on the boards, that's critical. So tell us about that and how you again have pivoted and transitioned or expanded what you're doing.
Absolutely. So one of the things I see as far as gaps, I see many gaps, but of course one of them is women, whether you're on a board or on a committee or just any type of position, right? Where maybe it's not a job per se, but it's a board or committee position, is how can we get women, again, they don't feel that they could qualify to do these things. So how can we get them to where they can get that experience to do it? But one of the things I had in my control to do is I started the nonprofit 2 years ago, Women Veterans Giving. And one of the reasons that I started that is because I can help mentor 5 women that would be on the board that have had no board experience, or maybe they've had experience, and then they can help the other women be on a smaller nonprofit board to be able to get some experience and to be able to understand the lingo and understand these things. So it's something if there are things that we can create and we can control, let's do it. So with that was one of my things that I did. And then also too, and actually and I don't know if she's going to be on before me or after me, but you had Betsy on. And I just had a call with her last week. It's just, when it's very interesting, when things get out in the universe, how they all work.
Yes.
Yeah,
so
she's phenomenal. Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Right.
So I had a call with her and Annalisa, and we were talking about that, and then just we're talking about the data and just everything. And so what has come out of it, of course, we're pushing the Women on Boards, the 2020 events that are coming up. But also, I'm going to be fortunate enough, Betsy's going to do a webinar for us for women veterans on how to get on boards. So when we talk about boards too, of course, there's corporate America, you have to have experience, but just understanding, right? Just even if it's just whether you just talk about nonprofit or corporate or, your city committees or commissions, other things, it's understanding of how can I get into do this. I'm very excited about that. And actually, we also have another webinar coming up for women veterans from a veteran who is on a board and committee on how to get on there. So it's being able to, in a sense, what I said, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yes.
So if they don't know, let's give them that information for them to know. Or, it's one of those things is maybe they thought about it and like, but if we can, bring that information to them to help women to start to think, well, you know what, maybe this is something that I could do. And as we look at veterans, we continue to serve, after we get out of the military and what a great way to serve and to be part of that change. And it's one of those things too, where it's, even just these last few months, just when we look at diversity, and that's a huge thing. And people know me, and especially in the veteran community, if I walk into a room and it's a bunch of old white guys in there, I have a problem with that. And they know that. They know. I'm like, okay, where's everyone? We have to change that. But if I don't speak up, then what's going to happen? So we have to make the change. And it's like that, the other saying, if there's no chair, bring your own chair or just create your own table. So we have to be able to do that. But we have to feel comfortable enough to do it, or that, that there's other people that are going to say, yes, let's do it. Let's make that change. And that's one of the reasons that I started Women Veterans Alliance is, I was looking for a professional networking group for women, and there was none. I mean, there's all the traditional veteran organizations, and just not what I'm looking to do. Network or, have conversations with a bunch of old guys. And again, they are changing. So I don't want to have to say they're all like that. But some of them still aren't open to that change. And that's a problem for me. I like to see that diversity, and also too, which I found in personal experiences where, I'm asked to share my story about my military experience, and then I'm cut off so he can tell me his story. I don't like to be shushed. I mean, that's just right. I mean, it's like, what, I'm just going to start my own. So that's what I did. I got about 20 women together at El Torritos in Sacramento, and that's where Women Veterans Alliance started. All because, there was a need, and that's why women have to, we can put something together. It's not like I have this great, I don't know. I guess, I say, it goes back to those stepping stones, right? Of being able to do something. But I feel if women can look at me, which I know, because if I can lead and I can inspire them, that's what I'm doing. Someone says, what, I want to come on board. How do you get to where you've gotten? I'm going to share that with you. I don't feel threatened by that. A lot of women don't want to share their secrets because they feel threatened. I want to share with you what I have, because there's so much. We, again, have so much work to do, and how could we do that together? And also, too, again, going back to having the diversity, especially being in Sacramento, we're very diverse. Also, too, I always have to share, too, which my family is very diverse. My husband is Black, and my daughter, who we adopted, she is Persian and Hispanic. So we have a very diverse family. And, of course, sometimes we get looks trying to figure it all out there. But I feel not just because of my family, but it's just, of course, but having that diversity and for us to have our voice and to be heard and not to be shushed.
That's so important. So
right. And I'm sure both of you have experienced that, where you start talking and you get hushed. However that is, someone talks over you. But just think how powerful it could be to have, then you have 4 other women in there with, 4 other guys. So at least you can have that. But we have to do it. We can't just say, why isn't there change? How can we make that change? And how can we be part of that change? Because we can't wait for people to make that change, just like we can't wait for government to make change when it comes to VA. We have to, people say, well, why aren't VA doing these things? Well, guess what? A lot of stuff has to be passed by Congress. And we know how that goes.
Yes.
So how can we come about and be that change and be that voice? And I want, I've created a great environment here for women veterans in Sacramento. And, I always say I know a lot of people, but a lot of people know me. We are a nationwide organization, but I want to be able to share what we do here with other areas, because guess what? It can happen. It may take some time, and you may get some no's or like, oh, we don't do it that way. Well, it's just it's working on that change.
So Melissa, how can people find you? How can our listeners find you? How can they find your book, your website? Let's share some information so people can connect with you.
Well, if you go to Google, if you type in my name, Melissa Washington, I guarantee I'll pop up there. Or even if you type in Women Veterans or Women Veterans Alliance, guarantee will pop up there. We're on all social media platforms. My book, Get Back to Work, is on Amazon. Of course, you want to reach out to me directly. You can pay for one, and I will personalize it for you as well. And it's also, my book is also in the Women Veterans Alliance. We have our own online store, where we can have shirts, which I have one on today. But we have jewelry, we have hats, we have things. But we also have a bookstore online, which my book is there. But there's also other women veteran authors that are on there. So if someone's looking to read a book by a woman veteran, we have those on our store. So that's where you can buy that. But I always just I could give you my email, melissa@womenveteransalliance.com. But it's a lot easier just to Google and find out all that information. And, follow us, like us, connect with us. If you want to support us, of course, we are always looking for those that want to truly support women veterans.
Thank you so much. This has been incredibly inspiring. I know our listeners will find it that way too. So much of what you've shared, gives women a roadmap. It helps them to know, A, they're not alone, and B, here's what someone else did that I can also try. And just rolling up my sleeves and doing it is an option. instead of waiting. So thank you so much for being with us today.
No, thank you both. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. You can find more information and connect with Christine or Tony at www.tffei.org or on LinkedIn at the Foundation for Female Equity and Inclusion.